Welcome to The World Unspun. I'm your host, Maxine Betteridge-Moes. If, like me, you weren't quite lucky enough to snag a ticket for the upcoming Together for Palestine concert in London, today's guest will most certainly be of interest.
My name is Frank Barat. I've been working on the Palestine issue, I think, for about 20 years now.
Frank is one of the organizers behind the concert, which is taking place at Wembley Arena on September 17th. The event will bring together British and Palestinian artists to raise funds for humanitarian organizations in Gaza, delivering food, medical supplies, and other support. The event is co-produced by Brian Eno, Khaled Abdallah, Khaled Ziada, and Tracy Seward. Frank is also an activist, author, and film producer, and he's written for New Internationalist many times, interviewing people including the Israeli historian and author Ilan Pappé and the film director Ken Loach. You can find his writings via the links in our show notes. Between 2008 and 2013, Frank coordinated the Russell Tribunal on Palestine, which was a people's court designed to uphold international law. Now, he interviews some of the biggest names in the Palestine solidarity movement on his YouTube channel, particularly artists, writers, and others working in the creative industries. I started by asking Frank how he got involved with Palestine and some of his other major work, before getting into the upcoming concert, which, don't worry, you'll still be able to live stream. Stay tuned for our conversation. I wanted to start with a question that I know that you ask a lot of your guests as well. As someone who's been so deeply involved in Palestinian activism and solidarity for so long, do you remember what the first moment was that politicized you towards this cause? And can you talk about what that was?
I think reading Noam Chomsky, Understanding Power, for the first time, really sort of made me think that I didn't know enough about this, at the time, Israel-Palestine conflict that everyone was talking about. But what's really changed the way I approached everything, I guess, was when I went to Palestine for the first time in 2007. There was really a before and an after Palestine trip. It's like, I think Arundhati Roy one day said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And this was exactly how I felt. I had watched tens of documentaries. I had read 20 books about the subject. But when I was on the ground, I felt like this was bigger and crazier and more important than anything I knew. And I also really quickly realized that Palestine was in a way like a microcosm of everything which was going wrong in the world, but also potentially a portal, a door that towards us making a better world, and that Palestine was a core issue, and that in a way, if we didn't take care about Palestine, one day everything happening in Palestine would happen to us one way or another. And I think we're seeing this now with the rise of this fascism 2.0 and the militarization of the police and the criminalization of solidarity and stuff like that.
What, in your view, is it about Palestine that has made it such a inspiring cause for people to mobilize around?
I think Palestine sort of touches everyone at different levels, and but Palestine is about, and again, to put it simply, the 1%, stomping on the rest of the world if they don't follow what the 1% are saying. Yeah, the bottom line is Palestine is still the issue because it's a laboratory for what can happen to the rest of the world and to us as a people, and maybe finding an answer to Palestine would help. We'll need to change the systems we are living under. Yeah, and I think people have realized that, and also people, once you've put a foot in Palestine, which also means the solidarity movement, demonstrations and stuff, there's also this kind of exhilarating aspect to it, right? You feel you are part of something. People and the 1%, again, the mainstream media have been trying and are trying to isolate everyone, to divide and rule to make you think you're the only one who thinks that way. And then you realize once you're surrounded by people in the street that actually there are alternatives to this horrible world we live in. So I think it really empowers people.
I know that you also previously coordinated the Russell Tribunal on Palestine, which intended to reaffirm the supremacy of international law. And the so-called People's Court had several sessions over these years. Can you talk about what the ultimate impact of that initiative was?
What I remember from it myself and what I took from it is like bringing people together. This was really important because like for many years, you also had like the lawyers and the international jurists working, together on their own. You had the artist working on some stuff on their own. You had the activists and the organizers and the union leaders working on some different stuff. And what we did for about 6 years is put everyone in the same room and say, how can we support the work of lawyers, but how can lawyers support the work of the movement? And how can artists be really sort of a key part of the movement as well? So bringing everyone together and creating these links also, because in every session we travel to a different country. So creating links between the South African solidarity movement, the Irish solidarity movement, the Spanish solidarity movement was key, and it helped sort of really build up the network. And also, I think because the people we worked with were really experienced lawyers and jurists and very prominent, we gave tools to the movement, including legal tools. And I know the BDS movement has used some of our findings on corporate complicity and stuff for many years. And I mean, in South Africa was 2010 or 2011. We came up with a 120 pages report saying that what Israel was doing in regards to the whole of the Palestinian people was apartheid. This was like 2010 or 2011. And 10 years after, you had the Amnesty International report, the Human Rights Watch report, coming to the same conclusion. And the lawyers that have read the Amnesty report and the Human Rights Watch report were telling me that it's 90% what we wrote 10 years previously. I think also we brought a lot of artists in the movement, actors, musicians, and because we brought them under the prism of international law, like to kind of reassure them as well, it helps kind of educate and radicalize a lot of our patrons. And I'm thinking about, Roger Waters, Ken Loach, Angela Davis, Alice Walker, I think it helped also, make the journey towards understanding what was happening in Palestine a lot clearer.
Do you think something similar to the Russell Tribunal, or do you think the Russell Tribunal, as it was in its form back then, is necessary now with such a groundswell of public action and solidarity with Palestine and this, seemingly complete lack of government action?
As soon as, the genocide started, I think a couple of months after, like myself and the core organizing team of the Russell Tribunal, we were talking to each other going like, I think we're going to need to have another one because, we could see clearly that governments were not going to fulfill their legal obligations. But I remember also we were maybe naive, and this was maybe 6 months or 4 or 5 months after the start of the genocide, because the most sort of urgent issue was to stop the genocide. We kept telling each other like, okay, we'll work on the tribunal, but let's work on the ceasefire first. The massacre needs to stop. Once it stops, we can start planning for a tribunal. And now we're 2 years down the line and it hasn't stopped yet. So I think, popular tribunals, so like citizens tribunals, have existed for a long, long time. It's crucial for the survivors to tell their stories as well and to be heard. And I think we realized that during the Palestine tribunal, and when we had it in South Africa, South Africans were telling us they felt the same during the sort of peace and reconciliation process, as problematic as it was. But just for the survivors to be able to tell their stories and to have their stories heard in front of like thousands of people and stuff was very, very important.
Yeah, and I guess Sort of related to that, on the flip side, there's a stat that I read a couple of weeks or months ago, and I saw you posted it on your Instagram as well, and I just can't get it out of my head, which is that there was a survey that shows that 79% of Israeli Jews are so-called untroubled by the famine in Gaza. And, we know the politicians that are enabling this will have seen all the same images and apparently are pretty unbothered by it as well. I guess I'm wondering, to what extent do you think we as a movement should be trying to reach those people that have been so obviously misinformed and subjected to this propaganda, Israeli and Western propaganda? I mean, is it worth it? Are those the ones that if we can reach them, will then kind of have the power to find a solution? Or do we instead have to focus our efforts, as we have been doing with, direct action, cultural and economic boycotts? I guess my question is, with our attention and our emotions being pulled in so many different directions, how can we keep our activism focused and effective?
I remember actually the first time I went to Palestine in 2007 was with Jeff Halper, who was leading a collective or a group called ICAD, Israeli Committee, against house demolitions. And Jeff was doing a lot of work with Israelis. He had an office, ICAD, and an office in West Jerusalem. And a few years down the line, Jeff said, I've closed the office in West Jerusalem because no one is interested anymore. And Arendt talked about this many decades ago, right? The banality of evil. But I remember also in 2007, that the wall, the apartheid wall was being built, but wasn't finished yet. And Jeff Halper made also a very important point. He said that this wall is to hide the Palestinians, for Israelis to continue their lives as normal without seeing apartheid and without seeing occupation and without seeing house demolitions. So Israeli society has been really brainwashed from a very, very early age, as soon as you can read and write, and the educational system teaches you that the David versus Goliath, everyone wants us dead. The Arab, because they don't call them Palestinians, the Arab that lives 10 kilometers away wants you be killed. You are surrounded by enemies. And then when they're 18, you give them a rifle and you tell them to go to the occupied territories, So they go there with this incredible fear that actually everyone wants to kill me, but also this hate towards the person in front of them. So Israelis are really brainwashed. And I think that at some point you have to focus on something else. I really don't think the change is going to come from inside. The change and the pressure is going to have to be applied from outside, the BDS movement is doing, which was also the case for apartheid South Africa. So I think this is our focus should be about enlarging the movement, but because there are so many people, and you mentioned also the Western media and the corporate media, there are so many people that are not in Europe aware of what's happening really in Palestine, but we've seen this, swift and this switch in terms of public opinion, that people have realized slowly, and even more so obviously in the last 2 years, that, it wasn't a conflict between two people, fighting for a land. It wasn't, a land without a people for people without a land, that it was colonialism, that it was apartheid, that it was genocide. The movement has grown immensely in the last 2 years. And what the students have done, what the youth has, what Jews around the world have done, what people everywhere have done, like Dockers, and it's really incredible. People don't understand that to sustain this solidarity, this activism, these direct actions for 2 years is pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you bring up South Africa and South African apartheid, and that change is unlikely to happen from within. A colleague of mine actually just recently brought my attention to the film London Recruit. Those listeners that haven't seen it, is inspired by the true story of how, at the height of apartheid in South Africa, the African National Congress recruited volunteers in Britain to travel to South Africa for undercover missions. We did an issue on the 50-year anniversary of the end of apartheid in a past issue of New Internationalist, and we actually have a piece in our upcoming magazine from one of these recruits, Ronnie Casrils. who led the London operation. So this is an example of Western activists being actively mobilized in South Africa against apartheid, and putting their lives on the line. Do you think that the severity of the Palestinian situation demands a similar kind of mobilization?
So it's funny because Ronnie Castrells is a very good mate of mine, and he's also he was one of the first patrons of the Russell Tribunal in Palestine. So Ronnie and I have been working like together on Palestine for many years, and then when Gordon Main, the director of London Recruits, adapted in a way Ronnie's story into a film, it felt like kind of going full circles. The powers that we are facing, and with technology, the security system, the way they can spy on everyone, wasn't present that much 50 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago. But look what's happening with the Freedom Flotilla, the global Sumud Flotilla leaving from Barcelona. This is the same. It's a different period, and but it's the same. It's hundreds of people around the world from like hundreds of nationalities saying that this is enough. We, the people, are going to come and help our brethren in Palestine. The government should have stopped the genocide very early on. They had a legal obligation and duty to stop the genocide. So I really hope that history will remember this time and all the people that have been complicit in letting this happen, because this is the first time in history that we are seeing a genocide live on our screens in 4K, in HD. And it's also the first time that people are bragging about a genocide. Like Israeli politicians, Israeli media have been saying very early on, we're going to massacre the Palestinians, we're going to starve them, and they're doing it. And people in the sort of political system in the West in particular, are always asking this question, but like, what's Israel's plan? We don't know what's Israel's plan, when Israel's plan has been very, very clear in the last 2 years, because they've announced it. They wrote about it. They talk about it on TV. It's about ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people. And actually, as you know, it's a plan that they started announcing in 1947, 48. So it's not new, but people are still asking themselves, if only we knew the plan.
I want to move now into some questions around Together for Palestine, because I think this sort of background and context is so important in terms of your work and in terms of the issue more broadly, because it helps emphasize that this is not just another fundraising charity concert, that this is so much more than that. So can you talk to us about how this idea came together and sort of what your role is in organizing Together for Palestine?
The idea was, yes, it's a fundraising concert, and we are aiming to raise hopefully over £2 million. But it's much more than that. It's about, this moment, this cultural moment, this cultural shift, and also to show everyone that the P word, the Palestine word, cannot be sort of, a symptom of like harassment and repression. Everyone should be able to say it, and everyone should be proud, and everyone should scream it out loud, very loudly. So this concert is also about this huge platform. We're talking about Wembley Arena, this huge platform, 13,000 people watching it live, hopefully millions watching the live stream, and like really major cultural figures saying, we stand together for Palestine. And for us, the name and the title was more important than anything. A few years back, you would have had to say Together for Peace, or Together for a Just Peace in the Middle East, or Together for Israel and Palestine. So yeah, this massive moment, September 17th, we're still working on the show. There's so much to do, but it's also going to be, it's a spectacle. It's not going to be just one artist doing one song and then one artist doing another song. we have, with the help of like amazing Palestinian director Amir Nizar Zouabi, we're creating a story. We're creating some stage moments. There's also a lot of collaborations between artists. Brian Eno is writing like this amazing piece, which is gonna involve lots of like, actors and musicians in it. So it's about this moment and this shift. And we wanted to do it at Wembley because we wanted to say we have the right to also do it at Wembley. We have the right to use Wembley Arena. So it's about being on the offensive as well. It's about, enough of just having to defend ourselves. We're not for terrorists. We're not anti-Semitic. We have every single tools, moral, legal, to say we are on the right side of history. And from now on, we're going to scream it very loudly.
Are there other ways that people can still get involved and support this event if they weren't, like me, lucky enough to get a ticket?
Yeah, it's going to be a live stream. We're also working with like broadcast partners in the UK, but also in the Arab world. We're also working on a film about the concert, which will take a few weeks, maybe even months to make. But we'll hopefully the film will hopefully tell the whole story of Together for Palestine. And also, people have to remember that even though Palestine and Gaza is political, they are desperate for funds and money. So yeah, people can also participate this way. I know it's not the most radical or way to participate, to send like £5, £10 or whatever, but any little help.
What role do you see for culture in continuing to shape public consciousness and solidarity for Palestine? What is its larger role here?
Obviously, music or cinema or poetry won't save Palestine, but artists, Nina Simone was saying, decades ago that artists need to reflect the times, and I think this is crucial. And also, artists obviously touch a lot of people, are very influential in some circles, but also artists should enable us to think about something else, like a different vision, how the world could be, and like films can do that, and it's also, and this is what I realized in 2007. I was wondering what really touched me and what really changed me. Was it the statistics about checkpoints, about political prisoners? Was it seeing sort of this military occupation live? Or was it the stories that, I was hearing from people, from friends, from teachers, from kids? I was teaching French to kids in Nablus. And I think what touches people is like, human to human interactions and stories. And the best way to tell stories is, through films, through music, through poetry. And also because you humanize people, right? And Palestinians have been dehumanized for so many years that, listening to their stories, working on stories with them is also crucial. And I think some Palestinian films in the recent years, like, 5 Broken Cameras, but also Omar, and also No Other Land, To a Land Unknown. Film like an art touches people in directly through the heart. And I think some people need that. They need to be, punched in the heart to sort of realize what's happening.
Are there other kinds of cultural or creative interventions that you think can go further, that can actually sort of help propel the movement to end the genocide?
I think the cultural boycott is a very important aspect because a lot of people, to avoid talking about the subject, say, oh, but culture should be about bringing people together. Music and art shouldn't be political. But it's obviously highly political, in every single form. And obviously, it's not about punishing artists or Israeli artists. It's about complicity with a system that is facilitating a genocide one way or another. I think it's crucial because we are looking at images that no one should ever, should never have seen. And we are seeing stuff that's happening to the Palestinian people that is completely unbearable. And I think a lot of us in the movement have lived through this kind of collective trauma for about 2 years, like because of like the feeling of powerlessness. But I think we should also focus on every single victories, along the way, along the journey to the liberation of Palestine and of us all, because like there are small victories, every day. And we have to, the journey towards like liberation in a way has to be joyful and exhilarating. Otherwise, who's going to join us? I think like there are many other actions we can take and undertake. Because, Palestine will free us all, right?
We also can't ignore the fact that Palestine is far from the only issue that, we need to be paying attention to. There's wars going on in Sudan and in Yemen and Syria, and people suffering in so many different contexts that just don't get the same airtime as Palestine is these days. What opportunities are there to apply some of the lessons and techniques of the broader Palestinian movement to different contexts? And how can we ensure that, we're bringing everyone along in this and that other causes aren't being left behind in the process?
Yeah, it's crucial. But again, I really do think that, Palestine, in a way, is intersectional in this way as well. Because as I mentioned, like when I started working on Palestine, since I've been working on Palestine, I've been involved in, I've been working on campaign to free political prisoners in Iran, in Egypt, in the Kurdistan. I've been working on police violence and state violence in Belgium and in France, and the fact that I've been working on like the flotillas now, Palestine is a key part on every movement. You're working against like global warming, Palestine should be on your agenda, but also obviously Congo and also Sudan and also Yemen. But I think we're seeing again how everything is linked, and that the wars in Yemen and in Sudan and stuff are also linked to the system we live under, and it's crucial to, of course, learn from one another and learn from movements. And when we were in South Africa for the Cape Town session of the Russell Tribunal in Palestine, the people that had fought apartheid, South Africa apartheid, was teaching us so much as well. And I went to Chile again 10, 15 years ago, and I was talking to some people in the Mapuche community, and they were telling me how what's happening in Palestine is exactly what's happened to them in terms of like ethnic cleansing, colonization, land grabs. So we need to bring these movements together, and I think it's happening more and more. It's like impossible to work on everything at the same time, but it's crucial to make these links because, again, it's all interconnected.
That was Frank Barat. He's a French author, activist, filmmaker, and organizer of the upcoming Together for Palestine concert taking place at Wembley Arena in London on September 17. You can learn more about everything you heard on today's episode via the links in our show notes. And while you're there, please consider subscribing to New Internationalist using the code TheWorldUnspun at checkout for 20% off the first year of your print and or digital subscription. Our current issue is on the rise of the global far right, and our upcoming issue is about Palestinian resistance. This episode was hosted and produced by me, Maxine Betteridge-Moes. I'm the digital editor at New Internationalist. Co-editors of the magazine are Amy Hall, Bethany Rielly, Conrad Landin, Nick Dowson, and Decca Muldowney. Our editorial assistant is Paula Lacey. Our theme music has been produced by Samuel Rafanell-Williams, and our logo design is by Fouz. Audio editing is by Nazik Hamza. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.